Welcome again, everyone, to the fourth live session of Learning Geology. Or today's live session is about why geoscience matters to you. You will learn why geoscientific literacy is essential for everyone, not only for geoscientists. Learning Geology is a community organization that aims to promote geoscientific literacy worldwide, and we do this by promoting and curating and creating different type of geoscience content on our social media platforms. This specific live session is a part of Geoscience project named Sustain Geoscience, and we are doing live sessions in collaboration with famous and renowned geoscientists across the globe. This is the fourth live session, and we have done last 3 live sessions, and you can see the recording on our Facebook page. These are last 3 live sessions after this one, and you can register by going to the link shown on the screen. These are free live sessions. These are open to everyone. That means open to people from all backgrounds and all ages. And these are really amazing one, and you must join. Bit introduction about speakers. So Dr. Haydon Mort is a CEO and founder of Geology Limited. My name is Qasim, and I'm a co-founder of Learning Geology, and I'm also a PhD student at University of Prince Edward Island in Canada. So in today's live session, you will learn that how geoscience information is relevant to people from all walks of life. And I'll now hand over to Dr. Haydon Mort.
Thank you, Kazim. Really appreciate that. If you could let me share my screen, be much appreciated. And we'll dive in. And so this is going to be kind of different, maybe to any geology talk that you've listened to before, because I am not going to be talking particularly about geology or geoscience. I'm going to be talking about the other way around, why it's important to you. So instead of dragging you to the geosciences and dragging you to an understanding of what it is, what I want to do is to actually drag the geosciences to you. Yeah. So it actually makes it relevant to you. It's going to get quite emotional, I think. But I'm going to start big scale and then work down small, so you can actually see why it really, really matters in the human way. So I'm going to share my screen now and kick off this presentation. Okay. So as you heard, my name is Haydon Mort. I am the CEO of Geology Limited. If you want to get in touch with me, this is my email address. Okay, hayden@geologize.org. Bit laggy my end. So we find ourselves on this amazing rotating ball in the middle of space. It sustains us, and it is the only home that we have. It's pretty miraculous when you look at it from the outside, because it's true, as Carl Sagan said, that there's nowhere else, at least in the foreseeable future, that we might be able to escape to. There's certainly probably nowhere else in the universe which is adapted to our needs, because we are adapted to the planet's environment. And so when I talk about the earth sciences and the geoscience, we're talking about studying this thing right here, where we live. And I'm going to make the case that it is absolutely important, ethically important. And ethics is a human affair. Why studying this, why being literate about our planet is so important. So I want to introduce you to some geoscientists. They can be anybody, they can be everybody. What do I mean by that? Well, these are some examples. These are some names of some professions that there are in the geosciences. It's basically anybody who studies the earth. It doesn't have to be the geologist who walks around with a hammer and a sun hat and lots of pockets It could be, that would be the field geologist right at the beginning there. But there are an enormous number of people, but they all have one thing in common. They all have a passion for studying our planet. So they could be biologists, they could be chemists, they could be physicists. Look at them, you have them right here. You have geochemists, geophysicists, there are geobiologists. You have even computer programmers. Yeah. You have people who study fossils, paleontologists, mineralogists. But as I say, they study the system, which is our planet, and the different facets of the planet. I'm going to show you that picture again, or this series of profile pictures, in a moment. But I think after I've given the presentation, you'll have a different perspective about what they do. They're not just nerds and academics that study their different area, but there's something a little bit special about them. I want to be arrogant about it, but they're studying something quite beautiful. And I want to make the case as to why that's important throughout this presentation. Well, if you're looking at this, you're watching this presentation, you probably already know why the Earth is important to your life, especially nowadays with cars, natural resources, EVs taking off, where you go on vacation, how much money you have. Then there's also other things which are outside of your control, like war, politics. All of these things actually are related to you, your family, what you can do, and what you cannot do. And I'm going to be painting that picture and filling it out a little bit more, fleshing it out throughout this presentation, how the Earth impacts your life. But I'm going to do it in some unexpected ways, starting from the very large scale and coming down to the very small scale, the individual scale. And I think you might find them quite unexpected. At the end, you'll see more and more as I get more personal why you should really, really care. Well, first of all, let's talk about something big. The biggest thing we have with regards to the Earth will be the Earth's magnetic field, generated within the rotating liquid outer core, much like a bar magnet. It shields us from the radiation of the sun, from cosmic rays from space. It's no exaggeration to say that you would not be alive if it wasn't for this process of rotating liquid metal happening around about 8,000 kilometers deep underneath our feet. Completely detached from our everyday life, but at the same time, completely relevant, because if it was suddenly turned off, there are some scenarios where that can happen. Earth would simply be bombarded by solar radiation. There would be huge mutations and everybody would get cancer and most people would die. So the Earth's magnetic field, even though it's something that we can't see, we can't feel, although we can look at it on our phones with our compass, for example, an enormous compass, is actually fundamental to your survival and you wouldn't be able to live without it. I think we can all understand, therefore, that something unseen, at least the principle that something unseen is essential for our survival. That's the first thing. What about food? What about what we eat? That's really essential too, because the way that we actually grow our food is fundamentally based on what the geology is, what the substrate is underneath that soil, which gives the fundamental properties of that soil, which allows certain food to grow. So the geology impacts the soil impacts what we can grow. And so without the geology, without an understanding of how we can actually be stewards of the land and where we should be able to position our crops based on what's happening underneath our feet, if we don't have good understanding of that process, which is geoscientific all the way through, we could cause a lot of suffering the way we grow food. Society depends on a good understanding of this process, this whole process. Okay, getting a little bit more relevant to our everyday lives, what we put in our mouths, for example. What about this? Well, this goes down to like who we are. What about belief? What about religion? What about culture? Well, we know very well that ancient myths in the Middle East They were shaped by natural disasters, which people in the time had no idea how they were formed. Yeah. And it was the basis, it was the crucible of many religions and many beliefs that people continue to carry through into today. And this is the fertile ground of what we call culture. So the culture that you grow up in likely had a natural origin, thousands, even millions of years ago, based on something that happened that we just didn't understand. So now when we talk about belief and culture, we're talking about something which makes us human. Yeah. You go around with your beliefs and your preconceptions about what is right and what is wrong. Well, it's not an exaggeration, again, no exaggeration to say that these preconceptions, they probably had an origin thousands of years ago due to natural events. We're getting really personal here. This is getting into our heads. War, conflict, the flight to control Earth's resources. This is a big one. It happens all the time. It is happening today. Many people watching probably don't appreciate that the war in Ukraine, for example, the eastern part of Ukraine, Kherson, Donetsk region, is one of the richest areas of rare earth elements in the world, certainly the richest in Europe. The economic estimate for the value of those rare earth elements, which go into our smartphones and modern technology appliances, is around about $11 trillion. That's enough to sustain a country for the next 100 years. Whoever controls this region will be self-sufficient. So we have to understand that there's always an Earth backstory, whatever we are talking about, whatever conflict. I'm not saying this is the reason for the war, the whole reason, absolutely not. But it is an essential backdrop. And if we ignore the earth sciences, the geosciences, what's happening underneath the ground in this case, then we actually ignore part of the solution. Yeah. If there are feelings and thoughts and biases on each side, which understand that this is a place we need to control, yeah, then we can actually diffuse a situation. We can come to some kind of resolution. But ignoring the geosciences is a way that war and conflict will be prolonged and people's suffering will increase. That's a big one. Refugees. It breaks my heart to see this, but it happens all the time. But refugees, especially children, no blame whatsoever, fleeing conflict and starvation, often do so because there has been a breakdown in the relationship between human beings and the planet. Yeah? Whether that's over extraction of water, which we'll talk about in a moment, whether that's desertification, deforestation, which causes environmental damage, which causes a decrease in evapotranspiration. This is happening in the Amazon rainforest. There's an alarming positive feedback. The geoscientists are trying to understand this, trying to calibrate how concerned we should be, but the conclusions keep getting worse, not better. People fleeing conflict and starvation. Now this happened, excuse all the annotations here, the 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s, but I want to tell you a very quick story about one particular environmental refugee situation, which happened in Europe in 2015, 2016, the European refugee crisis. It cost Europe hundreds of billions of euros, yeah, and it cost you, the taxpayer, if you're listening in Europe, also a lot of money, probably thousands per person. Well, it all started with number one over here, the over-extraction of aquifers in northern Saudi Arabia. If you looked from space at that time, you could see huge sprinkler systems the size of football pitches, turning the desert green. And what they were doing is they were irrigating the land to produce wheat, sucking out this water from these Paleozoic aquifers. That's Paleozoic, that's older than 600,000 years old. but also Devonian, Paleozoic. So the geology was being used to extract the water, the hydrogeology was being used to actually turn the desert green. But there was a problem, which led to 2, 3, and 4. They over-extracted the aquifers. The water couldn't be replenished fast enough. This led to number 2, a lack of wheat, which is a staple food for the entire region. 2, spread up here, riots and instability spread throughout the entire Middle East. And it gave rise to civil war and the Arab Spring in 2015. Civil war, repression of repressive regimes, such as in Syria, and the rise of the Islamic State, ISIS. All of this happened because of a destabilizing effect, because we didn't use the Earth's resources correctly. What happened? The innocents, the men, women, and children, became refugees, environmental refugees. Yes, fleeing war and conflict, but this is an environmental problem. So the refugees, they spread out from this region. They crossed into Turkey, where unfortunately they were not very welcome. Different Muslim creed, felt discriminated against. They came over here, Turkey, at the end of Turkey here, and tried to cross over into the European Union, where they felt this is where we're going to be welcome. This is Europe. This is the developed country. This is where we are going to feel safe, our families. And this was a particularly frequent crossing point here in Western Turkey, from Bodrum, right here, crossing over, very short crossing, only 5 kilometers or so, into Kos in Greece. People paid lots of money to do that. And what happened as a result of this? Obviously, Greece got overwhelmed. But this is the tragedy. These are all numbers, yeah? But these are human stories. Each individual refugee is a human being which has been affected by man's relationship with the planet. I want to give you a warning right now, because on the next slide is a very sensitive image. I won't keep it up for very long. Those of you who are sensitive predisposition, please shield your eyes. So this little boy, he was only 3 years old, and he died on September the 2nd, 2015. I remember seeing this picture at the time, and it impacted me an awful lot because he was exactly the same age of my son. He also has the same skin color, shorts, hair as my son did at the time. And he died because his boat was destroyed crossing in choppy waters in a storm crossing over to Greece. He was an environmental refugee. I will remove this image now. The point is, this little boy died along with many other people, thousands of people. It happened because, quite simply, humans didn't understand and didn't respect Earth's systems. In this case, we're talking about subterranean aquifer systems about 400 million years old on the Arabian Peninsula. If we had simply acted responsibly and not tried to make as much money as possible by doing things properly and understanding the science and understanding how much we are removing versus how much water is replenishing the aquifer system, simply that boy probably would have lived. As a step-by-step domino progression between our treatment and our relationship with the planet and our understanding of the planet and people suffering. So, you may never have given geoscience a second thought. Spelled incorrectly there, I apologize. But your life is actually fundamentally shaped by it. Yeah? These refugees, they changed the whole world, changed Europe anyway. And if you really think, if you're really cold-hearted not to care about fellow humans, well, think about your pocket, think about your taxes. because your taxes went into supporting these people who are in dire need. Your life is affected, even if things happen thousands of kilometers away. The thing is, for too long, we've actually considered ourselves as humans as separate from the earth. But by studying the geosciences, having geoscience literacy, by understanding the geosciences, it teaches exactly the opposite. We are not separate from nature. We are absolutely part of nature. And that's actually really, really important. Because geoscientists, people who study the earth day in, day out, we know this. Let's just almost become part of our DNA. We see the earth as a system and us as part of that system. So, look at the scales of ethics by studying and understanding our planet. By having that geoscience literacy, you literally change your perspective. When you change your perspective, you change your behavior. And in that way, you can react and act in ways to reduce suffering and enhance the quality of life. This is a fundamental truism of actually understanding the earth as a system and you're part of it. So that, everybody, is why geoscience matters to you. Thank you, Cassie. Have any questions?
Thank you so much, Dr. Haydon. That was a really moving presentation. Really incredible. Appreciate your thoughts and your time in sharing these insights with us.
You're welcome. So I'm going to look down here and see if we've got any comments. I can see Philip has said, except the most lucrative jobs in geosciences, those who find minerals like oil and exploration geologists. Well, Philip, you may not know, or may know, that it's actually there's actually a bit of a crisis in the oil and gas industry. People are being made redundant left, right, and center as oil companies themselves try to pivot away from oil and gas into renewables. So it's true, you're absolutely right. They are very late to the game, Philip, but it is happening. Okay, and it's important to separate geoscientists and the corporate mechanism behind these mega corporations, which, you are right, are slightly psychotic in nature because they are 100% profit driven. Yeah, because they're on the stock market. They literally have to be, by law, beholden to shareholders. But the geoscientists themselves who understand the planet, that's a different game. That's what we're talking about. Michael says, thank you for sharing and pulling all this together. You're very welcome, Michael. If you have any questions, let me know. Amber says, absolutely amazing presentation. I completely see the connections here between humans and the earth. I took notes. Thank you, Amber. I really appreciate that. I think that the power of this kind of messaging, and I know you're going to be doing some outreach yourself, is that you're talking to people and talking to almost their soul, so to speak. You're talking to who they are as people. And actually linking the geosciences in a very human way. Yeah. And so I think that's hopefully why the presentation resonated with you emotionally. But if you are interested in understanding more ideas, more ways that we're connected to the earth in unexpected ways, You might be interested in my YouTube channel, which is, I have to say, not active anymore because I have my own business. It's pretty full-time, but it was called Geologize on YouTube, and I made basically very unexpected connections between everything, between politics, wine, food, all kinds of stuff that you just encounter in your day-to-day life. And again, it was successful because people could see just by looking around them how everything was related to the geosciences and geology. Someone said, the head of geology at the Fortune head of geology said, do you see the EV revolution as a positive or negative event for Earth? That is a fantastic, well, thank you, Kazim, for sharing that. That's a really good question. So I've seen some research on EVs, and there's obviously a carbon footprint associated with generating an EV vehicle. And I think that's maybe what you're getting to there. Now, depending on the production, depending on the life of the car that is being produced, the current estimate is that an electric vehicle needs to be used for about 20 years before it pays back the carbon debt that actually created the car, that actually made the car itself. So obviously there's a lot. There's actually a balance there because we don't know if they're going to have a 20-year lifespan. And so the true answer to that question is right now, is it Amber, Fortune head of Geology Center, is that I don't know, because it is obviously going to cause a huge drive for resources that we don't have enough of yet, like cobalt and lithium. There's an absolute shortage of these resources. There's nowhere near enough mining projects which are coming on board to create enough new raw material. The circular economy, even if it was 100% efficient, is certainly not enough to provide enough of those metals necessary. And so is it going to be a net positive or negative? In terms of air quality, positive for sure. In terms of environmental destruction, it depends, because new advances in mining technology have to be employed to make it as least invasive as possible. But at the moment, it's probably the best way. It's the least worst option, is what I would say.
I'll add to that, Dr. Haydon. Did you definitely see, like, we don't know right now that how it's going to bring positive or negative impact on Earth, but I think it really depends on that how we are mining the minerals, like or rare earth elements like lithium, copper, these minerals which are used for these EVs or these batteries. I think it depends on how we are mining these minerals.
Yeah, and as you know, many of, like, let's take lithium for example, because that's like a hot one. The places where lithium is mined, they tend to be in these big brine settling pools at the foot of the Andes, for example, and it requires an awful lot of water. And this means that this water's got to come from somewhere, and these are not water-rich places. So we just have to find ways and technologies and be creative to actually do this sustainably. Otherwise, you are going to increase human suffering because you're diverting water from people who need it. And what are we here for on this planet if it isn't to reduce human suffering? So we have to do this in an ethical way. This is why geoethics, the International Association for Promoting Geoethics, is a real organization. That's why they're concerned about these kinds of things. Electric vehicles are not, for the foreseeable future, going to be a mainstay in sub-Saharan Africa, for example. They are going to be for rich people in rich countries, and that's going to continue to be the case because the price of lithium is so high because there's not enough of it. Okay, so you know, we have to understand that if we're not going to mine in our backyard, in developed countries' backyards, we're going to be mining in developing countries' backyards, and that has serious consequences. Have to do it responsibly, and we have to empower the people who live there properly. So it's not just trickle down economics. It's got to be done ethically. Otherwise, you're just going to get more and more suffering. And that's going to affect us eventually. It always does. Amber, do you think the more progress in technology, the more we progress in technology, that the planet will be destroyed? I hope not, Amber. That I would say that's a pessimistic opinion, but of course, technology, like any tool, like AI, for example, everyone's talking about AI, has positives and negatives, and you can be abused or used and abused. And so if we develop technology smartly, maybe together with AI, then it will not destroy the planet, okay? But we have to be incredibly creative. Now, for example, let's take biotechnology. You know, you can now grow steaks, like meat steaks in a laboratory now without having to kill cows, okay? Now, is that environmentally sustainable? It seems to be. Does it have less impact on the planet? Absolutely. So this is an example where technology can begin to substitute agriculture. And of course, agriculture is extremely intensive, and it can be damaging to the environment, can be damaging. So, you know, the way we carry out the exploration of the planet and its resources, it just has to be done in the best possible way. I like the way you point out the EV isn't going to work in thermal. It's the same for power generation. The third world is still going to rely on coal for generations. I'm a clean coal fan. All right, I'm going to agree with half of what you said, Michael. There's a debate, aren't we? I'm not going to agree with everything, are we? But yes, EVs are not only for only developed countries, they're only for relatively wealthy people in developed countries, and they're going to continue to be for a while. The third world is going to rely on coal, and not just to rely on coal, they rely on wood, don't they? And burning soil and peat and things like that. Now, when you say clean coal, I'm not exactly sure what that means. It still means that you have to burn the coal and you have to release the carbon dioxide. Now, if you're talking about replacing that with trees, and so you offset the carbon footprint, that's not particularly clean either, because it takes time for trees to grow. And therefore, your carbon debt that you take from burning the coal is going to take years, decades to actually be paid back. And by that time, it's too late, okay? So I think the clean coal argument is a bit of a fallacy. Yeah, it looks good mathematically, but for the climate, it actually doesn't make an awful lot of sense. Okay. If you want to come back to me on that, Michael, I'm very happy to be shot down in flames. Okay, no problem.
I guess we don't have any further questions, Dr. Haydon.
Yep, okay, no problem.
Appreciate it, Michael. We don't have any questions, so I'd like to conclude our session today. Thank you, Dr. Haydon, again for incredible presentation. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Please join us in the upcoming days for further sessions. You can find details on our Facebook page. Thanks again, and we wish you a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody. Bye for now.
Bye.